Welcome everyone to webinar number 6 for the Groningen Declaration Network on digital credentials in Europe. We'll be starting in just a moment.
Hello everybody, it's with tremendous pleasure that I welcome you to our first virtual annual meeting 2020. I would like to first introduce myself, Amish Rauf, immediate past president of GDN, a consultant with over 2 decades of experience working with institutions such as CDSL, a securities depository, worked on large-scale IT and organizational projects spanning both the public and private sectors. More recently, I had been working in the area of transforming the way Indian government delivers public services of providing academic awards electronically. Team GDN decided to create these webinars as a way to gather everyone virtually. These next few days are going to be all about us. More importantly, we'll spend valuable one-on-one time with each and every one of you so that you know your voice is not only being heard but valued. So why are we here in the first place? And I think the answer is, with people's experiences, distinction between real life and digital, that sort of melted away. Participants first focuses on the needs, being imaginative and visionary in terms of what we are actually going to be doing. The only way we are going to get there is by delivering that transformation in small sizes quickly. So I would like to say we are a part of a worldwide digital movement. Over the next few days, hosting these webinars will help us hone in on the skills we have been interested in learning. Thank you so much for your time and commitment in joining us. Looking forward to seeing everyone out there in Ottawa, Canada next year for the GDN Annual Meeting 2021. Hello everybody, it's with tremendous...
Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar number 6 about digital credentials in Europe. With the 6th webinar, we kick off part 2 of the 2020 webinar series. We are delighted to have you joining us today. My name is Tessa Moua. I'm a project manager at Ahovox in Belgium and part of the board of directors. I will be your facilitator during this webinar today. We will be welcoming 7 presenters today. First, Dr. David Vanozzi will give a presentation about the Seneca project, unbundling and sealing the academic degree within credentials. A second update will be given by Hans Pongratz about the Digital Credential Consortium. A third update will handle the case of Sweden. This presentation will be given by Ulrika Seidler from Linnaeus University and Per Zetterval and Erik Johansson from the Swedish Council for Higher Education. The last update will be about Europass digital credentials, given by William O'Keefe from the European Commission and Anthony Camieri from Knowledge Innovation. After these 10-minute each project updates, we will have a 20-minute discussion, and at the end of the webinar, there will be some time for questions and answers. We will close this webinar around 17:15 European time or 11:15 Washington time. Before we kick off the presentation, some information. As questions arrive, please use the Q&A function. This channel will be monitored most. Make sure to mention the presenter to whom you want to address your question, and these questions will be kept till the Q&A at the end. And the chat is best used for conversation between participants. That being said, I turn it over to Dr. Vanozzi. Thank you.
Hello, my name is David Vanozzi. I'm the CEO of the Consortium Seneca, the main consortium of Italy University. We gather 69 universities, 9 research entities, and 21 national public institutions. and the Ministry of Public of Education and the Ministry of University. CINECA was born 50 years ago and was founded by 4 founder university to manage the supercomputing. After, since 1980, start to manage the something about education, and since 1990 started to manage the degree of the university and something else. Now we are the main Italian and one of the most important European public company in this kind of field. CINECA main activities now are divided in high performance computing, technology support to the ministries, technology support to university, and technology transfer. We are managing a solution for digitalizing student management. The name of this solution is Asset Tray, and this solution was born in 2001, and now it is used in 70 Italian universities, the whole Italian university of the public sector, and in S3 we are managing 1.5 million of students active each year. You can go with the slides, please, and go. We have built a digitalization platform for Italian higher education system. This platform started in 2015. The name is BESTR, and BESTR is a platform to viralize lifelong and long-wide learning in all around the university, integrated with other kind of system. And BESTR, in figures, is used by more 90 organizations, 20 universities, many companies, foundation, education institution, and something else. Published around 1,000 of pages, and used 150,000 issued pages, 80% by university, and this is actually the best instruments for the Italian higher education. What is the main activities, main goals of BEST? First of all is the unbundling the examination. The other is secure the examination. The first is unbundling, because during the degree you have a curriculum which you pass many examinations, which is included in your degree. But with our system, you can use each exam in regard of all kind of university which recognized open badges. This system enables the permeability between extra and intercurricular activities and competencies, and favorize the mobility experience, because the institution hadn't to spend time to verify the declaration of the students, but has a recognized instruments which enable them to obtain immediately the valorization of the titles presented by the students. The second goal is the securitization, blockchain. Each part, each exam, each badge as managed in a secure system with a blockchain system, which enable us to have a verifiable notarization and a tamper-proof distributed registry, which immediately could be used by each university which gathered this kind of system without any problem, with the same security level of the university at home. More digital credential used by our company is the EDCI, European Digital Credential Infrastructure, and the diploma supplement. The diploma supplement is a European standard to add details to a degree. Our system is created automatically and digitally, is native digitally, can be added to degree open pages, and can be added to the diploma supplement to represent recognized extracurricular activities. EDCI, instead, is a European Digital Designer Credential Infrastructure, is a common language to recognize and verify digital credentials in Europe, enabling students' international mobility. EDCI will be the primary digital credential of the new Europass platform, and Cineca participate the EDCI national pilot together with AMPAL, is our agency for the labor, and the Veneto region in the north of Italy. Digital credential issued by university for curricular activity follow an entire automatic process, starting native in the information system and guaranteeing security of the data until of the synchronization. All the credentials exist autonomously and are coherent with the information system data. That's our system. I hope to be in the 10 minutes. Next next speech is Hans Pongratz of the University of Munich.
Hello, a very warm welcome from me. I'm Hans Pongratz. I'm COO and Senior Vice President at the Technical University of Munich. And I'll just switch to the next slide. I'll give you a short presentation on our efforts within the Digital Credentials Consortium and why we are looking for. This is a picture of a certificate we were sent by our supplier. It was a supplier verification request about 5 years ago. And it was a company in South Africa who asked TUM if the person, Jeremy Rundle, did a MOOC, took a MOOC at TUM. And you see the red circles, and you see that the scale of our TUM logo is not correct. And the signings, the signature of the certificate is by Professor Marlan. He's not a professor at Technical University of Munich, he's a professor in Harvard. And so it was a clear fraud, but it was an eye-opener for me that there is a market for students to make fraud certificates, even out of MOOCs, and that they try to get better chances for new jobs. And so, please, the next slide. We looked a little bit more around, and there are even real certificate miles out there. There are websites where you could order your fraud certificate you want, your university diploma, for example, or bachelor degree or master's degree, and you can even select the right paper size and thickness and the different seals and so on. And so we decided with other universities together we have to do something. And so the next slide, please. We teamed up. At the beginning, we were 9 universities who teamed up to make something new. And at the beginning, we were the Digital Credential Initiative, and then we founded it as a consortium. So the next slide, please. So right now, we are 12 universities who teamed up to do something in this field. I'll point out later on what we're doing on the precisely. But right now, we see on the right-hand side of the slide, our founding members is, for example, TU Delft, it's Georgia Tech, Harvard University, Hasso-Plattner Institute, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, McMaster's University, Tecnológica de Monterrey in Mexico, for example, TUM, UC Berkeley, UC Irvine, and University Milano Boccia in Italy, and University of Toronto. So we are from 6 nations right now, but we are looking to, get bigger and point out and get new universities to join our initiative. And we are committed to standard-based and learner-centric credentials. We have a strong commitment of our own institutions because we say, yeah, we want to point out now prototypes, and we're starting right now with the different prototyping. We have published a white paper in spring this year. There is a website, you can download it, and we're use case driven, and we are for sure, we're university driven, so it's not a vendor-based approach, but it's a university or higher educational institution approach. We want to cope with this issue. Next slide, please. So here's a slide on our focus. So we primarily focuses on use cases in higher education, not on all the other topics. You can use for sure this technology later on for other use cases too, but we are really focusing on the higher educational institutions. For sure, it's a broader effort we want to scope on, but right now we are setting on this one, and our goal is to contribute to an education landscape that increases learner agency and promotes more equality learning and career pathways. So our mission is really to create a trusted, distributed, and shared infrastructure that will become the standard for issuing, storing, displaying, and verifying academic credentials digitally. And the big thing is here that we are really focusing on the so-called envelope. So we are setting up the standard for the transport layer, I would say, but not for the content, because the content is quite complex. Perhaps you know, we in Europe, we have the European higher education area, and we should have all the same models, and we should have all something like diploma supplements and modal description, stuff like that. But there are 48 states, if I have it right now in my hand. And so there are a big variety around. And if we are talking on a worldwide approach, so we said there are different approaches to score some, or to store, for example, the skills, or to name the skills, and different ontologies there. But we really want to focus on the transport layer. So next slide, please. Our approach, we're working on based on emerging standards from the W3C variable credential, for example, on the W3 decentralized identifiers. We are pushing forward missing pieces, something like standards and protocols, learner-focused tools and standards, and we are working on a broader ecosystem to ensure interoperability and viability. On the right-hand side, you just see the verifiable credential ecosystem. I could point it out later on, but today we have only 10 minutes, so it's just a brief overview. So next slide, please. So we're working on previous efforts, for example, privacy by design and privacy by default, because we are, for example, from European universities, and there we have something like the GDPR and want to really cope on this. And for that reason, we are not able to just store a hash on a blockchain, because that's still a personal data. It's just a pseudonymization or the anonymization. And therefore, we are looking for smart ways to store the different information. When I push forward the ecosystem, I already pointed out, we have digital identities of issuers and learners we're focusing on. We want to build up flexible schemas and linked data, and have really solutions on them going there. And we are really working on a more direct learner agency control over one's lifelong learning record. That's something for the future. And we are developing and working on a transparent governance model that keeps the learner's right at the center of this approach. So the next slide, please. How we work, and we are entirely driven by higher education institutions. We're working on open source and standard code. We have the verifiable credentials for education task force. It's set up at the beginning of this year of the W3C. So we are open, or very welcome to work there and join us there. We collaborate with different standard groups and networks, for example, with IEEE2 or with PESC or T3 Innovation Network, or on a European level on Europass and the EDCI. We are looking for EPSI, for example, and ESEF. And for the German layer, there are different projects going on. And for example, the platform for international student mobility, there is a link, and we're working together with them. They are focusing more on the content and how to really exchange it that a student did a degree, for example, in Cologne and then moves to another university in Munich, for example, or if they go abroad for another country, and how to transfer the data there. And we're working with partners to create a vital ecosystem of options. So for sure, technology companies, online learning platforms, employers, and IT vendors, because we don't want to provide everything on our own because we're a higher education institution, we want to do research and teaching, but we want to set up somehow the system and then work together with vendors to have their worldwide ecosystem. Next slide, please. This would be as a simplified architecture diagram. We put it or pointed it out in our white paper. I don't want to go into depth because of the deep of this picture. It's just something like that. We have a different layered approach there. For sure, we want to connect to existing identity providers, for example, something like Shibboleth, or in the US, it would be Athens Network. But for sure, on European and national initiatives too, something like the electronic ID, which is pointed out. And therefore, we're working on these issues too, but we can discuss later on the following, I would say, following Q&A. Next slide, please. So to stick within the 10 minutes, my last slide, if you want to learn more about our Digital Credentials Consortium, for sure, you are welcome to join us in the W3C Verifiable Credentials Education Task Force, for example. We meet every second Monday, and it's free, it's open to the public. And on the other hand, you can find more information about our consortium on the one hand, and there's a contact formula. You can write us if you want to join, if you're interested for more information, then just write us a note and we can discuss further details later on. So thanks a lot. And I think I made it in 10 minutes, and I'm happy to answer your questions later on. The next slides are only for backup. I would, you can get it of the other projects. This was just an overview. We don't have to point them out now. It's just something like you can see what are the other projects in Germany doing, something like the Platform for International Student Mobility or the initiative to put together standards in Germany. Thanks for clicking through. You can jump to the end if it's easier. It's just a more technical detail how to exchange information. So the next thing is Erik Jonahansen and Per Zittanfall and Ulrika Seidler from Linnaeus University.
Thank you, and I think it's me first. You can switch to the next slide directly. Yes, welcome everybody. Nice to see you or not see you again. I hope that we will be able to meet in Ottawa next year once this boring virus gives up, because and I want to tell you, hey virus, you're going to lose it someday. Please give up now. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the government situation we have in Sweden, and Erik is talking from his perspective, and Ulrika will be talking about the Linnaeus University perspective. Well, the situation in Sweden, I think this differs somewhat from almost, most countries, that the government power is actually quite limited. We have rather small ministries with rather few employees. The agencies, though, are big and normally quite highly regarded. Actually, the most highly regarded agency in Sweden is the tax agency. That's a situation that's only possible in Sweden, I guess. And actually ministers are prohibited to interfere by law when it comes to handling individual cases, individual decisions about certain people. They would have to basically be breaking the law if they did that. Well, I think the situation, basically for me, I'm working at an agency, UHR. This provides great long-term stability. We're not that dependent of changes in government and policies, etc. The negative thing about this, it's not very agile. We don't move fast from one thing to another. One thing about, well, the Swedish approach to the COVID-19 situation has been that we're very open, etc. This is partly because the government has no power, for example, to decide about curfews. They cannot tell Swedish inhabitants, they don't have the power to tell us to stay at home. So that would require change in constitution, and that sets a bit of the situation that we have. Next slide. So what do we do in the educational sector with little guidance and few decisions? Well, we have to do it ourselves. We have always had a situation where we rather cooperate than compete between universities. That's partly because we're a small country and we have to do things together, but also we're not getting very much guidance, etc. And again, the ministries are very much prohibited to interfere. I can compare, well, my Norwegian colleague once got, a small paper which told them exactly what to do, and at the same time in Sweden we did get a book of 300 pages with policies, and that's pretty much tells us the differences. So all our national systems, IT systems that we have, has been developed by evolution and commitment from the universities, between the universities and the agencies involved. I think this has provided a good and solid ground for further cooperations that we have, and a few examples. Some well-known might be the LADO Consortium, Swedish University Network cooperation, and ESAM, which is a cooperation between agencies in the IT field. Next slide, please. Well, some examples that you might know and might not know about is we have a national admission system developed by the universities together with UHR. The LADOC system, which is the National Student Information System used by virtually all the universities and higher education institutions. Well, the bad example in my opinion would be the bank ID, which is our, well, virtually only national electronic ID solution provided by the banks. The backside of that is that you have to have a bank account to get an ID, etc. It sets some limitations that's not really wanted. There are different kinds of education information databases, and we handle data exchange between systems well easily, as long as we don't have any interference by the government. And with that, Ulrika, your turn. And next slide.
Thank you, and hello everyone. I will mention short about the digitalization of qualifications in Sweden. First of all, as Per already mentioned, there's a lack of national political guidance also on this matter. So this means that there are more than 50 higher education institutions that must decide on their own format. So in this type of decision, a lot of things matters, of course. Each university must themselves individually interpret regulation and demands from the surrounding society and from the students. Also, there has been cases shown that tradition and local leadership also matters. And maybe most important, could the question be, can we as a university prioritize it with the resources that we already have? Because there won't be extras from the national level. Next slide, please. At Linnaeus University, we were the first institution in Sweden to issue digital degree certificates only, and that was back in 2017. 3 years later, thus today, another 11 university and university colleges has followed our lead. Even though our first solution has been adopted by most of these 11 universities, there are already 4 different solutions in the country. In 2019, Linnaeus University also started a project and a pre-study about a platform where we could let the students share their own degree certificates. Next slide, please. So the situation today then is that more than 11 higher education institutions are also working and investigating their own solution to go digital with the degree certificates. Also, national pre-study, similar to the one that we made in 2019 at Linnaeus University, is conducted this year, but on national level. At Linnaeus University, we would of course prefer this national platform, since this would be the best for the students and furthermore create amount of trust. Therefore, Linnaeus University paused the process of creating our own platform. We handed over all our material to the national pre-study, and now we hope that there will be a national consensus among all universities that all students in Sweden will have access to their qualification diplomas and other merits through one and only one platform. We also have a strong belief that this would lead the university that hasn't gone digital yet to actually do so with their degree certificates. So both the digital degree certificate as well as such a platform is pure grassroots level initiatives. It comes from the universities themselves. Just because there is a lack of national and political guidance, regulations, or enforcement in these matters. So that's short about the qualification situation and digitalization of them. And while I'm asking about the next slide, please, I also hand over to my colleague, Erik Johansson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erik Johansson. I work as a credential evaluator. I will also talk about what is going on at the Swedish Council for Higher Education, despite lack of leadership from the government. I work as a credential evaluator, and I want to give the credential evaluation perspective. As I say here, credential evaluation, where it all comes together. First of all, credential evaluation organizations evaluate foreign credentials for academic and labor purposes. And just like universities, evaluation services both receive and deliver digital data. At a pre-corona conference in 2019, an attendee from a university said the following words: "Your input is our output. Your output is our input." This reflects how interconnected the universities are with the evaluation services. Next slide, please. I'm going to briefly talk about input, throughput, output. When it comes to input, our digital application system has been up and running since 2015. What we receive at the agency is PDFs, JPEGs uploaded via an online form. In the input phase, we face trust issues, document provenance issues. For the input side, we have to rely upon authorized sources, and the ability to verify information is key. And the best input comes from online verification portals, third-party portals. Some of these services are offered by GDN signatories such as Digitary, Head, and Parchment. Another phase is, of course, the throughput, the processing system that we have had up and running since 2007. This is, unfortunately, from a digital point of view, a bottleneck. The system is based on unstructured data. We're still into manually assessing documents on a screen. This is, in essence, a paper workflow. Example, the applicant's birth date appears on an image and cannot be imported, but has to be manually typed into a database. The output since 2019 is based on digital evaluation statements. The evaluation statement is sent as an email. We use PDF files that are encrypted. We are still paper-based in our thinking, unfortunately. Although this digital evaluation statement does wonders. And as for the future, next slide, please. What we would like to see at our office in the future are maybe e-portfolios, the portability of electronic evaluation statements on different mobile devices, for instance, apps, e-wallets, and so on. A shift from unstructured data to structured data. The MREX initiative is very important here. Our colleagues in Norway are already doing this. Data mining as well. Interoperability. would benefit us greatly, leading us from isolated information silos to interconnected digital ecosystems. Next slide, please. So what motivates us? Closing the gap between our citizens' digital expectations and what our analog organizations actually deliver. Restoring trust in a post-paper world, ensuring operations during a pandemic, the belief in the GDN as a catalyst for change, and finally, the conviction that paper isolates us, whereas digitalization connects us. Next slide, please. Thank you. And now I would like to hand over the word to William O'Keefe.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Herman and Tessa and the speakers for adding us to the agenda. We were a late addition. So almost more than a year ago, when things were very different, I presented the work that was underway in Puebla on Europass digital credentials, the Europass digital credentials infrastructure. So I just want to make a brief introduction to our work and hand over to our lead expert, Anthony Camilleri. I'm very happy that we launched the first public preview of Europass digital credentials on the 1st of July with the launch of the new Europass platform. And we're also very fortunate that we have 18 countries who are currently piloting the infrastructure with us, and that we can also let you know that we've now started the process of rollout to vendors of education software with education and training institutions, so that we've advanced a long way. Anyway, we just wanted to recap on the basics of the infrastructure. So on the next slide, you'll see the homepage of the new Europass platform, which was launched on the 1st of July as one of the actions of the skills agenda for Europe, a set of actions by the European Commission to enable skills development and readiness for jobs across the EU. We launched the new platform, and we're very happy to say we just yesterday we hit a key target of 500,000 registered users. As to what's in Europass, on the next slide, please, you'll see that there are 4 key elements. First, for the European citizen, for people across Europe, job seekers, learners, workers, we've made available a free multilingual e-portfolio tool for them to record all their skills, qualifications, and experiences, to receive suggestions of jobs and courses, to have a personal library where they can store all their personal documents, evidence of their learning, including their digital credentials. And then this is all complemented with information provision, information on education, learning, working in Europe to help them with their education and training choices. And then as part of to complement, to enable the e-portfolio and the information to maximize it, the platform itself, we're going to make sure it's interoperable so that the Europass users can easily share their applications, their profiles, their data with education and training providers, with recruiters and employers, so that Europass is well connected with the education and training system and labour market across the EU. And as I say, you know, within less than 3 months, we're very happy with the usage and uptake so far. And within the e-portfolio, there's the established tools, the CV editor and cover letter editor. And also you heard mention earlier of tools like the diploma supplement. These types of templates are all part of the Europass suite of tools that we offer to enable communication of skills and qualifications in Europe. As part of the Europass platform, we've also launched the Europass digital credentials infrastructure, which is one of the planks, which is the implementation of a key part of our legislation to enable the authentication of different forms of learning and to support the transparency and communication of skills and qualifications in Europe. For more detail now on the infrastructure itself, I'll hand you over to Anthony Camilleri, our lead expert on this part of the project.
Thank you very much, William. Good afternoon, everyone. Next slide, please.
In designing a system for credentials in Europe, we had a number of design considerations we were taking into account. The first of these was that what we needed was a framework for digital credentials that can be used by different vendors, different actors, and different institutions, rather than just providing a service that processes digital credentials. The system needs to be valid across all European Union countries, and also be designed for interoperability. We are thinking of 40-year lifetime for credentials, and we also want to ensure that the system can't be abused by deployments. Finally, last design challenge is that there is a very, very complex interlocking set of legislation at regional, national, and European levels that deal with topics around education and credentials, and anything we designed would need to interlock with that existing legislation without requiring changes to any of it. So to start with all of this, and in particular regarding a framework, the first thing we needed to look at was a data model that would be able to capture this kind of complexity. Next slide, please. So in looking at existing data models for education, what we found was that while we found a good standard for the envelope of the credential, which is the W3C verifiable credential spec, in terms of the content that goes in the envelope, there wasn't really anything that matches all the design considerations we had. So the approach we took was to essentially build a data model that would be an extension of W3C verifiable credentials, describing the content in a common European format. Thus, a Europass credential is made up of the basic envelope features, which include metadata, information about the issuer, information about the subject, and the e-seal. While in terms of content, we have decided to describe 4 different types of information class. The first of those is activities, and activities could be 150 hours of coursework, it could be 100 hours of apprenticeship, it could be following an online MOOC that does not award an assessment. An activity represents something you have done, but not necessarily the learning you've achieved as a result of the activity. For the learning you have achieved, we have the concept of achievements, and achievements are divided into 2 concepts: learning outcomes and the assessment which proves you have reached those learning outcomes. So in an example of a credential, you might have an achievement, which is the German qualification of painter, which awards the learning outcome of the skill of painting, which is represented by a final examination with grade B, for example. The other 2 credential types are entitlements and attestations. Entitlements are rights you are awarded by virtue of having this credential. So a right might be the entitlement to work as a painter. It might be the right to participate in the medical chamber, or it might be the right to apply for a specific master's degree as a result of a bachelor's, for example. Attestations in our language are credentials which are built on other credentials. So for example, an enigmatic recognition statement is a credential that says something about a credential awarded in another country. So attestations allow us to describe properties of other credentials in new credentials. Next slide, please. The other part of that's important in the Europass credential infrastructure is the verification checks we use to secure the credential. So the mandate we received from member states was specifically for digitally signed credentials, with an emphasis on securing these. Thus, we have 3 classes of checks. The first of which is a check of authenticity, the second of identity, and the third of accreditation. Under authenticity, we look at stuff like, has the data model been used properly? Are the right required fields used? We check if the credential has been revoked. We check if the credential has expired. And critically, we check if the e-seal has been tampered with and if the issuer information matches the information that is on the e-seal, which is provided by the provider. Under identity, we can match the identity of a credential with the identity contained on your national EID for countries that support this. While under accreditation, if you are offering an accredited qualification, then we are also maintaining a list of all accredited education in Europe, and we can match to ensure that the provider is indeed accredited to provide that type of credential. If you are offering non-accredited credentials, this is no problem at all. The system still supports that, but you would say that this is of type non-accredited credential. You wouldn't create that expectation, and therefore there wouldn't be any accreditation check. Just to show you what all of this looks like on a simple interface. Next slide, please. This is an example of a check credential issued using the system. And what you see here is that on the left side of the screen, you have the information categories. In this case, the credential has information about the issuing organization and the credential owner and their achievements. In the middle, you see a visual representation of the credential, which is equivalent to the paper certificate you receive. And on the right, you see the results of the authentication and verification checks. So you see that the seal has been approved. Next slide, please. So the last thing which is important to mention is that when we talk about digital credentials, we talk about a digital credentials infrastructure, which is a set of standard services and software designed to support providers around Europe, so that we can create an interoperable system of credentials, not to get everybody to use Europass as a centralized service. That means that the entire infrastructure is made up of a set of standards, which we call the Europass learning model, which is the data model and the rules on how to issue credentials. We have a set of services which are offered by Europass itself, which include our issuer, our wallet, our credential viewer, and the accreditation database. But the third pillar is equally critical. We offer code libraries that allow any institution to build their own compatible wallets and viewers. We offer a developer playground and API library so that everyone can connect to our services. And these are backed up by technical and business help desks to help with those implementations. Because our overall vision for this is that to have several providers offering an interoperable system of high quality credentials with interoperable wallets. I can leave it here and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you to all our presenters for their update on their projects. I think this was a very interesting overview. The next 20 minutes, we will have a panel discussion. At least one presenter of each project will have the opportunity to answer each question. If you from the audience would like to add a question for the discussion, feel free to send it by using the Q&A function. And questions for a particular presenter, we will keep till the end to the Q&A. So to start the discussion, it's good to hear how all these projects on digital credentials keep on evolving over time. But I would like to hear from our presenters, what are, according to you, the challenges that we are facing for digital credentials in Europe now and on short term? Who would like to go first?
I suppose working on the project from the perspective of the Commission, of course, we're ultimately a political organization. There are 36 countries participating in Europass, so there's such a diversity of perspectives and practices. And like Anthony is explaining, we've had to design a very broad and open data model to cover all of the different types of ways in which you can achieve learning, so that we can support formal and non-formal learning. But one of the things that's always resonated with me is some of the feedback we got is we can build these impressive projects and systems, but one of the things we'll need to accomplish is to earn trust, so that when we have credential evaluators and education and training institutions receiving these digital credentials, how and when will we get to a situation where they will implicitly trust everything they're seeing? Because of course, the story of recognition and the story of cooperation on education and training in the EU is a long-running one, and there are lots of processes and projects but I think our work on digital credentials is fundamental to enabling recognition and understanding of qualifications and learning, but the trust may take some time. So this resonates with me. How will we earn the trust of receiving the credentials?
Thank you, William. Does anyone want to contribute to this?
I could just add on to that with the issue of trust. I mean, the national platform that I spoke just a few seconds about, we're really happy that that would be a national platform in Sweden because of the question of trust. If each university in Sweden comes up with their own platform, the employer and the other higher education institutes would be very confused by this. So trust is for sure an issue when it comes to digitalization as well. As we were the first university in Sweden with the digital degree certificates, we had questioned, what is this? Is this something that is as valuable as the original paper that we used to see? And when it comes to looking European-wide or international-wide, of course, the less platforms where you can go and do what you can do now than also in Europass is the better, because the bigger it is, the better known it would be.
Thank you, Ulrika. Maybe Hans or David, any one of you wants to add something to that?
About challenges in Europe, I believe that making digital credential widely used is the challenge, and another challenge is the standardization, because without a general system in which can recognize the systems of all countries of Europe, for many times we continue to have a great confusion.
From my point of view, I think it's important that we start somewhere, because I follow the discussion since more than 15 years or something. As I was a student, there was it already ongoing with open badges or badges at all. And from my point of view, it's very important that we have good use cases. And from my point of view here in the University of Munich, it's something like that. We have the use case, we have lots of incoming students, and we have lots of outgoing students. And for the incoming students, we need something, and for the outgoing students, we want to give them something. And now it's the time, the Corona is, with all the bad issues, is a huge catalyst for all the digitalization topics. And so from my point of view, we should start, we should just cope, and we should need something the universities and higher education institutions can use right from the scratch. I really appreciate Europass and all the initiatives there, but it's a different layer. It's something like you focus on all the learners somehow, and not only higher education institutions, for example. And from my point of view, we are focusing on that, but I'm happy to discuss further with you the details.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the challenges I identified myself was indeed that there are already a lot of projects, similar projects about digital credentials, working on the same things. So I was also wondering, how can you as a student or civilian find your way in all these projects, and how can these projects and organizations then cooperate to find a solution for this?
Perhaps in an ideal world, the student shouldn't notice which system it's used, because it just has a digital credential and he or she can use it somewhere else. It's something like even all the discussions, if you are blockchain compatible, agnostic or not, whatever, it's something like a layer technology, and we have to do a service on top of it. And then we have something like to define standards for sure, but there are good examples within the Bologna area, for example. We have on the paper, we have standards till 20 years even, but it's always depending on the national level, how you cope with these standards.
I'd like to add something just briefly, if it's okay.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
As I mentioned in my presentation, I think it is crucial that we live up to the expectations of our citizens. There are digital expectations on us. So it is up to us to deliver the service that our citizens are expecting. And I think they expect us to be digital in 2020. It is our job to make this happen.
Is there somebody who wants to add something to this, or someone who agrees or disagrees?
Tough discussion today, huh? You need an icebreaker. But it's beautiful weather outside, because perhaps because of that everyone is silent. No, I think I completely agree, and somehow perhaps there are different approaches. You can start small and then scale up. So there are some approaches around. I learned from Sweden, for example, if you're their national platform, or if you team up even in the city, for example, and you can scale up, or another approach to go top down. And I think DG Employment and the different DGs on the European level try to interact and provide a European solution we could use, but then it's up to us to, to get it to our students somehow, to get it live. And I think that would be something like, even we can discuss later on with all the participants in this meeting, what are their remarks on that? How should we point it out? What are success factors, for example?
Thank you, Hans. Maybe another question. Do you believe there is an influence of COVID-19 on digital credentials? Does it make digital credentials even more important, since students can't go maybe physically anymore to the institutions? Or do you think it's a challenge now because since COVID-19 projects can't go on? I would like to hear your opinions on that. Is there someone who would like to go first?
I could add something on that. I mean, I can't talk from my own point of view here, since we are digitally issuing our degree certificates, but I know from colleagues in other universities in Sweden that hasn't the digital degree certificate, they have ended up in a situation where, even though they're supposed to stay at home and work from home, they have to go into work, to the office, to print, to stamp, to sign, and everything. So that's a true benefit that we have seen here now. Can we move our staff home? Yes, we can, because we can do everything at home as we can do at the office, which means that we were not delayed with any degree certificates at all during the summer. So that's a true benefit in these times.
I'd like to add that as a credential evaluator, our experience is similar to that of Ulrika's. We introduced digital evaluation statements that are sent by email to the applicants. This was introduced in 2009. And during this pandemic, if we still would have been paper-based, our operations would have come to an absolute standstill. Digital evaluation statements make it possible for us to work 100% from home, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think it's a baseline something. Why not is always the question. And for sure, if you have something like online learning, you want to have an online certificate too. Why, if you make something like a massive open online course, or right now, the last semester and the following will quite virtual too, they were completely online. And our students took online courses, and now they wonder why they have to come to TUM, for example, and pick something up, or we have something like postal mail stuff. So why not an online certificate? Sure. And there we need the possibilities to automatically process all these information, because that's a big topic. It's not just getting a PDF out there, but we want to have the next step. We want to be able to make automatic transaction with the content of the certificate. And if we could do it automatic processing, then we could even save a lot of labor time at TUM. For example, solely for identity checking from about 30,000 applicants per semester, and this semester we had 35,000 applicants. We have to check their ID, and we do it right now on a paper-based way, and it costs a minute per person. And if we can do it automatically, we could save 35,000 minutes, for example. And that's a big thing. And so we have to work on all these digitalization issues, and one of them is a digital credential.
And from the Commission perspective and what we've been doing with Europass, we've received the question in the COVID context, well, why are you launching this, a project that's about mobility? But of course, we need to redefine our ideas of mobility, and exactly in the examples you've been describing, communication and understanding of skills are more, it still needs to happen, whether it's online and how we exchange information. So the value of what we're doing is more important than ever, because we're still exchanging more and more information online and on different types of learning. So with the COVID context, you know, I feel happy and reassured that what we're all doing is still, you know, very valuable.
Okay, thank you very much. I see there are also some questions from the audience. There is a question about the link between digital credentials and self-sovereign identity. How important is self-sovereign identity to make digital credentials work better, or to use it cross borders? I don't know if someone...
Should I? I think it's always the question how to provide identity information. And as I pointed out, we have to check the identity at the University of Munich if you want to become a student, for example. And you have your online or digital certificate, you have to check for sure too. And there are different ways, different approaches. If you, for example, put the certificate as a PDF right now with the name, last name, pre-name, whatever on a digital layer, for example, a blockchain, then you have always to keep in mind that you have to be GDPR compliant, the right to be forgotten, for example. So you have to be able to delete this information later on. So if you have it somewhere in a database, you have to always tackle this issue. And there could be a solution to have something like a link to a self-sovereign identity. And there are European projects, there are worldwide projects, W3, for example, working groups. And from my point of view, it's a very good way to give the learner or the person whose information is stored digitally the right to control the information.
Thank you, Hans. Does anyone want to add something? I see there is a remark from the audience that we just need to make sure that less developed countries can also be more involved. I see we have like 12 minutes left, so maybe it's a good idea to start looking at the questions that we received. Thank you all for the discussion. I see that there is a question for Ulrika about would it be ideal if Sweden moved to the EU Digital Credential Service?
Yes, thank you. I was just typing an answer to that. But,
okay.
I can say it live. It really sounds interesting, and it would definitely be something that I would check more into. However, once again, I think it would be good if the whole country of Sweden then would join such an initiative, so we don't have these pop-ups within our own country already with different solutions. But I will I'll keep in touch on so.
Thank you. And I see, sorry.
Just to be fair, if you think right now, we don't even have a standardized paper size around the world. You have US letter, you have European and so on. So it's not standardized right now. So for sure, it's a huge issue to standardize this on a digital level. And so Ulrika, it's a very fair point, but I wouldn't be too, I would say, too optimistic that it's a very fast one that we will solve. So we have just to start somewhere. And if you look, for example, in EduRoam, it works quite well. It's a decentralized system. You have something like a federated approach, and that could be a very good way, from my point of view, to exchange certificates too.
Yeah, but also as well, just to team up and discuss these issues and bring that information home, that in these countries we are already talking about it, so we have to start at home, and then somewhere we would be able to meet on the way.
Thank you. There's also a question for Anthony. Will Europass wallet support non-EDCI credentials? Is there any compliancy convergence planned with this new W3C Universal Wallet workstream?
Okay, I will take this up on two levels. In terms of non-EDCI credentials, if they are, let's say, more traditional PDF style credentials, or even, let's say, scans of legacy documents or so on, the Europass digital credential wallet is integrated into a wider Europass library, where you basically build your CV and employment profile, and you can store different types of files there. So you can have credentials that are verified through our own Europass system, or legacy credentials living side by side. In terms of other providers of digital credentials, what we are providing is let's say, open wallet APIs to allow for deposit, and we are working with a number of vendors of credential systems to build systems for them to export credentials into our wallet, while being able to display the verification checks that are done by those third-party vendors. So in terms of working towards a more global solution, what I can say at the moment is that the overall intention of Europass has always been to promote interoperability of credentials. A lot of our experts are also involved in the W3C talks about things such as a universal wallet and so on and so forth. We're clearly not committed at the moment to provide support for a universal wallet, because no such thing exists yet. But if a universal wallet was agreed globally, I think this is something we would look at with extreme interest.
Okay, thank you. I see we have no more questions. I think a lot of questions were already answered via the chat. Maybe just since we have another 8 minutes left, we identified a lot of challenges. I think one of the most important challenges is trust. What can we do to tackle these? What are the next steps that we can take? Who needs to take the initiative for this? Or how can we make sure that we start tackling it, and that it's not something that we keep saying every year again, but that we start doing something about it? I don't know whether someone has an opinion on that.
I liked the question earlier on the role of the ENIC-NARICS, which is, a global network of experts who are investing their time and energy on recognition and understanding of qualifications. And we hope that with Europass, we hope that a recognition statement, the type of statements they issue, can certainly can be considered a credential that could be supported through EDCI. And I'd be really interested. I hope that we'll be able to have good cooperation with the ENIC-NARICS as a real test case when it comes to this issue of trust, because of course ENIC-NARICS have varying requirements and specifications that they all need to comply with at national level, from very soft law to legislation that needs to be enforced. So I'd be really interested in test cases like this of kind of networks or different organizations embracing credentials in different ways and looking at how they can perceive them, and kind of in this way kind of methodologically and systematically start building up trust through test cases like this. So this is what we'll be looking to do in the future, picking specific ways to establish the trust around Europass digital credentials.
May I comment on what William said? Since I represent an ENIC office, I just want to say that you've been using the word trust repeatedly today, and I totally agree with you. Trust is at the center of our whole discussion here today. It is where everything starts and where everything ends. The ENIC is definitely a very interesting platform to start with. And I just want to mention that there are 2 reports out since the spring of this year. One, a DigiRec report that was organized by, the project was organized by NUFIC, the Dutch ENIC, and the topic is digitalization and what it means for the ENIC network. And I want to promote that report, and I can make sure that it is possible to be uploaded to this forum. Also, the Nordic Council published a similar report on what digitalization means for the higher education community and the ENIC in the Nordic region. Both of them are in English and they can be uploaded. And William, you might find these reports of interest for your work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I worked in the Irish ENIC in a previous life, so I'll be happy to see those.
Okay, thank you. I see that we received a question for Per and Eric, so maybe we can answer this, and then I think it will be about time to end the webinar. The question is, what would it take for credential evaluations to be mutually recognized across borders, even within the ENIC network? For instance, portability of recognition.
I think that's yours, Eric.
Let's see, Simone, let's see if I understand. The mutual recognition across borders. Ooh, I think that would be a tricky one, because the states of Europe are sovereign and are sovereign in the field of education. So that would mean that maybe a recognition from one country would be valid in another country. We're not there yet, but definitely if you add the trust factor into everything you do, the recognition process will be much smoother than it is today. If there is absolute trust in what you receive, a recognition or a credential from another's country, that would smoothen things a lot. And that can be done in very different ways. One way is, as we do it, our statements are encrypted PDFs, but maybe even better, structured data that is sent from one country to another through a safe portal of some kind, or like something similar to the MREX project. I hope this answered your question, Simona.
Thank you, Eric. And I think with this last Q&A that we will have to end our webinar today, I would like to thank all of our presenters. I think that was a very informative session and that we had a discussion that gave us some food for thought for the future. Many thanks also to Melanie Gottlieb and ACRO for supporting the delivery of the webinar today. The next webinar will be about lifelong learning and digital learner data portability on Tuesday, September 29th. So have a nice day, and we hope to see you at webinar 7. Thank you.